Hello everyone, welcome back to MLS Moves. Please make sure you like this video down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Once we hit 5,000 subscribers, we'll be celebrating with a special jersey giveaway. 2 lucky subscribers will have the chance to win a jersey of their choosing. Whether you're a diehard fan or you're just joining the fun, this giveaway is our way of saying thank you for your support. So spread the word, hit that subscribe button, and let's reach our goal by the end of July. Now, back to the video. Copa America and the Euros are currently being played, and these are the 2 biggest tournaments going on outside of the World Cup that there is. Currently, MLS, even with these tournaments going on and with players from their league participating in these tournaments, are continuing to play regular season matches, and some clubs will even play up to 6 matches during both tournaments. This is something that needs to change because MLS is currently missing key contributors to their clubs because of the scheduling conflicts that the league has. This is another reason why I believe that they should be going to the European calendar. So I had Eric from the Voices of Black and Gold to join me and kind of debate on which side is better for MLS, the current schedule that they have, or switching to the European schedule. Also, before the video starts, let me know which schedule you prefer. Do you like the way MLS is currently structured, or would you like to see it go to a European schedule? Now, on to the video. Eric, welcome to the show, man. I'm so excited to have you. How's it going, bro?
Good, Will. How are you doing, man? For me, it's been great. Can't complain. Just ready to talk a little Fuchi ball here.
Yeah, man, I'm very excited to have you. We obviously had a very successful stream last night. You hopped on for, I don't know, probably like an hour and 10 minutes for the Canada-Argentina game. And I was just watching that game, and I've been thinking to myself for a couple days or even weeks about how pissed off I am with MLS's schedule. I've always had an issue with it, but this month and the next month is really highlighting my frustrations. So we're going to get into that. We're going to talk a little bit about the scheduling of MLS and especially with these tournaments. So first off, Eric, MLS is playing games right now, and we have 2 major tournaments going on. We have Copa America and we have the Euros going on. How does this happen where you have games going on, regular season matches, when you have these 2 important tournaments where a bunch of your players are participating in?
I mean, life just happens like that, and that's how it goes. For me, and I know there's a lot of rabbit holes to dive down in this, and I think there's a lot of perspectives as well. I do think a lot of it gets kind of delineated by, I'm just kind of setting the table before we have this kind of conversation, which might be a bit of a debate at times. I think a lot of the people who are fans of the beautiful game and particularly closely follow Europe tend to be more aligned with wanting our league to kind of be more that way. And then there's other fans who are more MLS fans and not necessarily European fans, which I fall into that category. Like I fell in love with MLS going to my first ever LAFC game. And I've said it before to other people in 2018. When I went to that game, I didn't even understand what offsides was in soccer. I played a lot of sports my whole life, but like most American kids, I played soccer till I was about 10, and then I moved into baseball. And so I kind of came into this as more of a sports fan, particularly NFL. I'm a huge NFL fan as well. So a lot of my perspective on this is going to be from that side of it. There's other people here that grew up watching the Premier League. They grew up watching Champions League, the Spanish League, Bundesliga, etc. And I think to them, like, that's the foundation and everything's aspiring to that, and I think on my side of it, on other people who are more kind of MLS homers, we're more just, I think, looking at the game as it is here, and kind of the live experience is a big part of it as well. And so I think some of it gets separated out. So I think your perspective on this issue is going to have a bit to do with like where you fall into and your general like love of the game and what got you into the game in the first place. So
No, and I agree with that. It's just I think the scheduling issue kind of makes people have this perception that MLS isn't serious about getting the best quality players playing in these matches that do matter, or that they just don't care about the first half of the season, and in the second half of the season is where it starts. We talked a little bit about that last night. there is so much to dissect here, so we're going to break it into parts, right? The
Yeah.
first issue that I have with MLS with their scheduling is when they have the current format of going from February to November. November, if you make the playoffs, and sometimes December, that it fluctuates, right? A lot of times the playoffs are in November, and then the final will be in like the beginning of December.
Yeah,
But the
that's
pro but
no.
the problem with that is, though, Eric, is that in the summertime they take these breaks. Or they're not taking a break right now, but they're going to take a break for a month and a half to play Leagues Cup. So some of these players in this tournament aren't actually going to play an MLS match, an official MLS match. Like Messi, for example, his last match was June 1st with Inter Miami. His next MLS match isn't going to be until August. So he's almost the entire summer not going to play a single MLS match. And I think that that's a big issue. We can talk about Leagues Cup later, but this specifically with this tournament, I want to be on the European schedule because I want this to be the off season right now for MLS, not be the middle of the season. So that way these players who are in these major tournaments aren't playing in the regular season. This is their summer preparing for the next season.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I totally understand that. And there, I think from a 30,000 foot view, it sounds really good. Where I think it's not as big of a deal for MLS is, one comes down to like alignment. Like, the South American leagues, the big South American leagues are also not taking a break. Like the Brasileiros playing, the Primera in Argentina is playing. If we look at Liga MX, they have those kind of the Clausura and the Apertura, so they have like the kind of two mini seasons in one year, and they are taking a break. But a lot of the leagues in the Americas are playing through this break just like we are, and so on that, I would say, hey, if our league aligns more with South America, and you can also look at like where are most of the MLS like prospects who are from out of country coming in? Not the sunsetting guys like the Giroud who's coming, who much like Messi, he's signed June, but he's not going to play a competitive match also till August because he's out at Euros, which isn't ideal for us. But a lot of the younger players, the developmental guys who I think teams are hoping to flip to Europe, are coming from South America. And so being aligned on that schedule, I think, has some positives, and it doesn't really get looked over and talked about that much. To the US, being from northern Minnesota, I know what December, January, and February are like, and they are not football playing weather. There are workarounds on that as well. I know you've brought them up, whether it's doing extended road trips for that time in southern latitudes. Like, there are workarounds for that for sure. The last thing I would mention at this is the one thing that really separates MLS with other leagues is our relentless determination for parity, and with that, we have, I don't have it in front of me, but a spitballing, we have something like 16 or 17 different MLS Cup champions in 28 years. And I think when you look at the Bundesliga, for example, that had Bayern Munich lose for its first time, and they were on a 12 straight streak, having the championship built so that it more moves around the league. It's very hard to win twice is has. And with this, I think this break becomes a bit of a parity mechanism as well. It's usually the better off financial teams that have more aggressive signings that get the international players. And so losing them for these league games makes it a bit of an equalizer for the lower and smaller market teams that can't necessarily draw these names in to be able to go through without missing guys and playing teams that are now all of a sudden missing one or two DPs.
Yeah, well, I would say that the Bundesliga is a good example of a team dominating the league, right? And I'm not necessarily wanting that to happen, but you look at the Premier League, which many people would consider the best league in the world right now, probably by a significant margin. I think they've had 5 different champions in the last 10 years or 11 years. And there's only 20 teams in there. 14 teams are new champions MLS. Sounds good on paper, but you got to look at how many teams there are in the league. There's not just 20 teams, there's 30 teams, right? So obviously we're talking about 25% of the Premier League different winners, right? And then in MLS, you're talking more close to 50% of different winners, or 45%. I mean, that is cool on paper, but I want to see teams that aren't prohibited or limited to spending to make a super team, because I know that you would love to see LAFC spend what they are capable of spending. We know that they would have a Griezmann, a Giroud. They'd have DP quality backup players on the bench. They wouldn't be playing to the rules the MLS has in place right now. But Eric, the biggest thing I have a problem with this scheduling, right, is we talked about this last night. With how MLS treats the regular season, it's almost like the first half is a wash or preseason, because a lot of teams don't actually start trying until the summer window when they can bring in other players. You look at your LAFC. Last summer, they tried to make a last-ditch effort, which they did make it to the MLS Cup final. But how many players did LAFC specifically sign in the summertime to try to make that run to the MLS Cup? They signed Kike Oliveira. They signed Mario Gonzalez. Obviously, that didn't work out. The Hungarian midfielder, or I think what he was Hungarian, but
Felipe Krastev.
Yes, yeah, they made a big play to try to push for the playoffs instead of making a lot of these signings in the winter window and trying to be good from the get-go. That is another issue I have, because maybe it's harder to do business in the winter. A lot of teams in Europe, which is the biggest market obviously there is for football. South America is big too, but Europe is the biggest. And maybe these teams are reluctant to sell their best players halfway through the season because it's hard to replace them, right? So
100%.
your middle of the season is everybody else's beginning of the season. So it's just, I would like to be in some type of in sync with these other leagues, because it makes it easier for player transactions and you don't feel like half your season has been wasted or is a wash.
Yeah. I mean, I hear you. I think wasted or a wash is, I kind of push back a little bit, because I think every league has its particularities, and it's almost like don't hate the player, hate the game. And the rules are the rules. And as kind of an analogy to this is what I found out in 2019 when LAFC won the Supporters Shield, and then we basically got slapped out of the by Seattle Sounders in the Western Conference Finals. And we can talk about Seattle Sounders and what they're going to look like in the next Club World Cup as well, and how that fits into your argument, because it's a completely different team at this point. But looking at that, it's we found out that the Supporter Shield isn't very highly regarded amongst other fan bases, because we're our second year as fans now. You'd like, look at this, we just won the Supporter Shield, that this is the championship everywhere in the world, is the most games, and everybody's like, easy fellas, the MLS Cup is the true championship here. So in some ways, like, we've kind of Americanized our league. And as I was mentioning before, if you look at the MLS people that came into it, a lot of them come from the NFL. And the NFL is structured very differently than European football, which is where a lot of the stuff is. So, I can almost look at the argument, we are catering to an American fan base. And so Americanizing the game and Americanizing the structure, it has some sound logic to it as to why we would do that. Why we put the emphasis on a playoffs, because we as American sports consumers demand playoffs in everything. And it kind of comes down to, like, where are we going to grow this league from? And this is another thing that everybody's going to have a different opinion. And there's not really too many bad opinions on that. It's just different ones. Like, how do we grow the league? Are we going to grow the league from existing American sports fans? Are we growing the league from, first and second generation immigrants that come here, and aside from their team they have at their home country, they're now going to adopt another team for their new home country, So I think a lot of this is more strategic. Where are we going? For myself, I was an NFL fan that crossed over to MLS. So a lot of mine is, looking at how many NFL fans are there. How can more people like me discover this game that they didn't know and often have a lot of crazy preconceptions about, and fall in love with it like I did? So, there's a bit of of bias on me, and that is that what worked for me, I could see working for other people, but other people came in the game in different ways. Like I said, there's a lot of different ideas on this.
Yeah, and I want to bring up one more point about the schedule of a flaw for it, right? So when you start in February and you end in November, okay, November is only if you qualify for the playoffs, Eric. So think about this: a team like, we'll just use LAFC. Well, maybe not LAFC because they are going to make the playoffs. We'll use a team like Inter Miami last year, right? I'm not trying to use too many references from Miami, but they were a good example of this last year. So they started their season in February and they played Leagues Cup. They played a couple months and then they signed Messi. I think they're about 4 months into the regular season. They signed Messi. They made a last ditch effort, like I talked about, to try to make the playoffs and signing all these players. Well, they came up short and they didn't make the playoffs. So they were eliminated in October and didn't play another regular season match until February. So that means that they were off for 4 months. There is no other top league in the world that has 4 months of no play. And I did do some research about what you had said, because you brought up a good point last night and even today about a lot of South American leagues starting or playing on a similar schedule to MLS. But the only difference is they have like 2 leagues. Brazil, for example, I think they play in something called the Paulista, and that actually starts in from January to April. So they, even though the schedule's the same, they're actually playing the whole entire year. Where MLS is really only having about 6 or 7 months of official matches.
Yeah. With Brazil, it's the state championship. So the Paulista is for everybody in Sao Paulo State, which is a lot of the big teams, and then you have the Carioca, which is the Rio de Janeiro state, where you're going to have like your Fluminense, your Botafogo, and same thing in Minas Gerais, where you have, but and also in Porto Alegre, where you're going to have your Grêmio and Internacional. So basically, how they do it is their first 2 months are spent in the state tournaments. And then after that, they go to the Brasileiro A or B, and the state tournaments are the same A or B. But yeah, it's almost more like a warm up tournament, because in that state tournament, they're going to play teams that are going to be second and even third division once the nationwide thing happens. And yeah, the state tournament usually starts like late January, early February, and their season ends like late November, early December typically. So they do have a very short window as well, but their weather is, you can play soccer all year as long as you don't mind some heat and humidity.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, even if they're playing third division teams, second division teams, the main point is that they're playing matches all year long. I think they said Luis Suarez played like 57 matches last year for Grêmio, which is absolutely insane. He's not playing that many matches in Major League Soccer this year. By the way, my wife just got home, so I'm sorry if anybody can hear my dog barking. She's excited. But yeah, man, I just think that I don't know if you can hear that. She's going crazy. But yeah, I just think that they're Brazil specifically, they might play too many games, because I talked to my friend, tactical manager Filippo. He said that the scheduling in Brazil is gruesome. It's a very tough schedule, wears you down. And I just feel like we're not doing stuff like that. We're not doing enough. Like, Inter Miami is only going to play probably 7 or 8 months of actual MLS matches, and that you just can't do that. Like, you have to play a lot more official matches than just 7 to 8 months of the season in the calendar. The Premier League plays 9 months or 9.5 months. They have like a 2-month break, and the Bundesliga obviously has a break because it's so brutal in the winter. But that's fine, man. If you want to say Minnesota, Toronto, Montreal is unplayable and the weather is that bad, we can do a month break. That's fine. Don't play the whole month of January, or play half of January on the road and just give like a 2-week break. There are, like, 10 years ago, Eric, I could understand. There's only 20 teams. You're limited to what you could do. Now there's 30 teams, man. Logistically, you have so many options of what you can do and how you can schedule. Toronto FC back in 2015 was remodeling their BMO Field, beautiful stadium. They played the first 8 weeks of the season on the road, Eric, because there was under construction. So yeah, it would suck, but come on, man, these are professionals. If you play 8 weeks on the road, you know what that means? You get to play 8 games at home in a row. That's
Yeah.
nice, like, right? So you get the kickback on it. So I just think that we need to try to transition like the J League is doing. The J League made an announcement that they were going to transition to a European schedule. And then, like, I think it's 2025 and 2026. And by 2027, they will be fully aligned on the European schedule. And I really do believe that would enhance us because we're able to take breaks during the tournaments and we're able to be on the same market frequency as these other major leagues.
Yeah, I mean, it's a viewpoint a lot of people are very passionate about. I mean, for me, I think I don't mind it the way it is. And we were talking, like you said, Luis Suarez 57 games. LAFC last season, we played 53 games, and we did this with MLS roster, which, if you look at the Brazilian roster, those teams don't have like the senior roster limits capped at 19 and then bringing your supplemental up to 28. Like these teams have 40 player rosters plus massive development sides, and I think that's why I think a lot of it, like with me, I view MLS as more of a development league, and that's where I'd like it to be a development league. And so part of this, it looks to me like what's our end goal? And I think if the day comes that we ever have our teams invited to things like Champions League, of course, then we'll have to be there, which I'm sure Europe would never allow it. But I think as it is right now, if we start looking at when our league gets good enough that we can start actually flirting with the idea of playing some of the top European teams in top European leagues in a way that actually like is a competitive for some reason and not just an exhibition or a friendly, I can see it more happening. But until then, I think most of what we're looking at as competitive games is south of us, not east of us. And especially we've had the conversation about MLS trying to get into Libertadores as well, which is another one with travel I think is completely insane. But if this is a direction that we think will benefit our league, this is another argument I'd say, well, maybe we should look at continuing to keep our schedule more aligned with South America if that's where our competitive games are.
Yeah, and I'll bring up this point. You mentioned earlier about how Mexico does like their two leagues, separate for a full season, right? That is another advantage that Liga MX, and I don't care what the fans say, the Liga MX fans coming after me saying, oh, it's 37 trophies, you're delusional. The fact is that when they're playing in that Champions League final, they're at the end of their season. They're in the best form they possibly could be. And MLS teams are trying to catch up and get into form by their preseason starting in February. And they're playing these games to make it to the final during these months. So that's another reason why I want to be aligned, because even our regional partners, we could be able to compete better with them and be in the best form possible. Because I think that it looks worse when you're comparing talent because of where we are form wise and where they are form wise. And there's a couple Champions League finals we should have won regardless. Like the LAFC final against Lyon, we should have won that. I don't care. Yeah, I know it's sad. I don't care what the circumstances were. They should have won that game. They were definitely a more talented team. They just had a terrible two-leg performance that series. But I'm going to give you my perfect schedule, Eric. This is what I would love to do. Okay, you start the season in late August. Okay. So you keep going, you get to the wintertime, you take a 2-week break in January. All right, 2 weeks, because January is normally the most brutal month when it comes to, in the winter and the cold and the snow. And then the northern teams will play on the road for about 2 or 3 weeks until February, which is where the season starts now already, right? So I don't want to hear any excuses about you can't do that. That's when the season starts already, okay? So then you play the regular season until the end of April. Then the whole month of May, Eric, is the playoffs. The whole month of May, 1 month. That's plenty of time to play the whole month or to do the playoffs. And then the MLS Cup final is on June 1st every year. June 1st every year. And then the end of your season is June. And then this is the best part. Ready for this? The MLS preseason is Leagues Cup, which is also Liga MX preseason. So both leagues played their preseason tournament, which is Leagues Cup, in July and then August. And then when Leagues Cup is over, MLS regular season starts. That's perfect for me. That's the way you do it.
Yeah, I would love a play-in tournament, much like we were talking about the Brazilian League, how they do their state tournament. And for the big teams, it's a warm-up because they're playing second, third division, and they're able to work things out before like the season really starts to get serious. I do like that. But, I think, on the other hand, the way the schedule is a reality. And, again, back with LAFC, because that's, what I'm most familiar with. When you were bringing up who we brought in the summer window last season, bringing in Kike Oliveira, or Krastev coming in, Mario Gonzalez coming in. They weren't really, this wasn't guys brought in to finish the cup. And if you look at when we went to the Champions League, it much like Columbus, when team, because of the way the salary cap is set up, and this is a whole other conversation with the TAM and the GAM, and
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, TAM GAM, thank you, man. But the TAM is GAM that can roll over year after year, and I'm pretty convinced when it comes to roster builds in MLS, what teams will do for a couple of years is they'll keep their TAM spends down, and they'll accumulate a bunch, and then they'll take their year that they're going to push, and that's when they'll spend their surplus. And we did that when Gareth Bale showed up, Christian Teo showed up. Both were on max TAM, and we had been swimming in it ever since the Walker Zimmerman sale back in 2020. So we had been accumulating it for this push. And once we made it through, Bale decided he didn't want to stay. But otherwise, we were going to try to keep that roster together to push for the CCC. And when July comes, at that point, you're to the point where you now have to lick your wounds and you have to start over like with your rollover TAM. And that's really the Krastev signing. These are all more lower dollar signings that were kind of coming in to start the next cycle, and I think that's a lot with MLS teams. They're looking at 2 or 3 year cycles with, building up your core and then bringing in your high value guys that you can't keep for a long time, getting to where you need to go. And then you have to get rid of this salary so you can start the building process all over again, which is, again, part of the parity mechanism. And I know it's like meandering a bit, but I'm just saying that with this schedule the way it is, it's kind of a reality that GMs have to prepare for and go through this. And we've seen John Thorrington, who I think is shown to be one of the better GMs in the league, and how he manages the roster spends to deal with all of these weird timing on things. CCC in the preseason is ridiculous. And, really some good teams can get knocked out just because they haven't had time to gel. But if you're going into the CCC, your offseason has to be done preparing this. If we had won and went to the CCC, our roster build in the winter would have looked much different than it is. We would have been trying to hold on to talent. We would have been letting guys go as easily, and I think that's pretty factual.
Well, and another thing too that I should have mentioned earlier, the biggest issue is I feel like when you have these tournaments, which is getting every soccer fan's attention and focus, it hurts the growth of the league because they're playing matches that probably aren't getting as much attention as they would if there wasn't competition with other big games. I don't know about you, but personally, I've been laser focused. I've been watching MLS games, but I've been laser focused into the Euros during the day, and I've been watching Copa America at night. Or I'm going to. Obviously, last night was the first match, but that's what my schedule is going to be. And this is going to be going on until the end of the tournament, which is July 14th. So we have a little bit about a little under a month left of matches, and that's my problem, Eric. It's just playing 5 matches for the league when people aren't really paying attention. I mean, that's almost 15-16% of your season that people don't really even care about. And by the time that this whole tournament's over, the season's going to be put on pause and you're transitioning to Leagues Cup. So a lot of people aren't even going to be really – now, obviously, you're different because you're an LAFC fan, and there are some passionate fan bases that are still tuning in. But I'm talking about that average fan who is just wanting to watch a good game and just kind of tuning in to relax and see some soccer. Those guys aren't tuning in right now. Those guys are watching the Euros and they're watching Copa America. And there's a lot of fans like that. I mean, we don't have any numbers about the streaming, but I would have to say that Apple's streaming numbers are probably down right now.
Yeah. No, I can't argue with that, and I'm an MLS sicko as well. So, I mean, I think it was 2 years ago, I was complaining that Kellen Acosta was going to get called up for the U.S. team, and I wanted him to stay for the club because we needed him to win some games. like that's kind of how I get at times, which is unrealistic and unfair. But um, I think that's kind of where the dividing line again comes. Like, as an MLS sicko, like if it's USMNT playing and LAFC, like I'm going to the stadium to watch LAFC play. I'll TiVo the US national team. And so it kind of, I think, just comes down to the preferences. And I'd be interested to see, with other people, I'm sure they're like me, that really their priority is MLS over international competitions, which of course is much more beautiful, much more technical soccer. Like if you're a purist and you love just watching the beautiful game, you're going to want to go where the quality is the most. And for otherwise, like for me, I love the live experience. I love my team, my games, and obviously I'm not going to travel 2,000 miles to watch my favorite team play. I'd rather have my favorite team play 5 miles from me, and
100%.
if it was a USL team, I think I'd feel the same way, because I think for me, soccer, the live experience is just so it's really what makes it, but that's just me. For other people that want to see the technical thing, like we're not going to see the technical ability in MLS games that we're going to see in the Premier League or Serie A or the tactical battles as well,
Not
so
yet. Not yet.
not yet.
Hopefully one day we can get to that level, and that's what I'm doing. That's my mission. That's why I do this, is because I'm trying to push and get that done, Eric. And yeah, I want people in the comment section, let me know, do you think the MLS needs to change their calendar specifically because of tournaments like this? Are you cool with the way it is? Let me know what your reasoning is behind either either one of your preferences. But Eric, I appreciate you coming on, man. This has been really fun. I'm definitely going to have you back on again sometime. Where can people follow you at on Twitter or on YouTube?
Yeah, look for Eric VOBG, just like my handle here. You can follow our show, Voices of Black and Gold, all things LAFC. We're live weekly on Mondays at 7 p.m. Pacific. And YouTube, we also have Voices of the Black and Gold, our channel. That's where to find our show. Otherwise, you can find me at every single tailgate at BMO Stadium in Los Angeles. I really don't miss too many games.
Yeah, and make sure you guys subscribe to their channel and follow them on Twitter. They have he has great co-hosts and Nick and Celso. They got a really good show. They've been popping off lately. I would say it's probably the biggest and the best LAFC centric podcast there is. So make sure you guys subscribe to them. And yeah, man, I appreciate it. And until next time, I'll see you all soon.